All right, I think we're live now. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Chad Toprak, and it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you our Freeplay 2020 keynote, Bahiyya Khan. Bahiyya is a multiple award-winning game designer and writer from Johannesburg, South Africa. She's most notably known for her IGF-winning game After Hours, which is an FMV game about a young woman that was molested as a child and suffers from borderline personality disorder as a result. Bahiyya is currently doing her master's in film, which she also lectures into part-time. She likes us because she gets to show people the same series she's been watching on repeat since 2009. Bahiyya makes games for social change, to tell marginalized people's stories, and to scream about My Chemical Romance. She only cares if teenage girls like her work. Please make Bahiyya welcome. I'll hand it over to you.
Hi there. My name is Bahiyya, like Chad said, and I'm very excited to be the keynote speaker for Freeplay 2020. So when I was working on my Freeplay talk, I came across the story of Zora Shah, an 8-year-old girl who was an unpaid domestic worker employed at the household of a couple in Pakistan. Her parents agreed that she could move with her auntie to the city, who would provide her with a better life and education, with the view of one day becoming capable of financially supporting her family. Instead, she was made to live and work for the couple who abused, tortured, and eventually killed her. On Sunday, May 31st, Zora was brought to hospital with extreme injuries. According to the police, her former employer admitted to beating her until she passed away eventually in hospital. He did this as a result of Zora releasing expensive parrots from a cage. Remember, Zora is 8 years old. When I was working on my talk and thinking about Zora, I felt like I didn't want to speak at Freeplay anymore, because when I thought about video games, it felt quite frivolous and like it was purely about entertainment. But even as I thought that, I knew that I was lying, because I know that the ways my games help people, and not just my games. One only needs to look at the Black Lives Matter support bundles on itch.io to see the transformative powers of video games. To quote a phenomenal novelist and essayist, Arundhati Roy, another world is not only possible, she is on her way, and on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. When I was a teenager, I read the lyrics of the song Head Rolls Off by Frightened Rabbit. You can mark my words, I'll make changes to Earth. When I think about the sort of changes that we can make to Earth, I think about a lot of great organizations that help us make these changes and help us to improve the lives of so many people who are currently struggling and who have been struggling historically. In memory of Zora Shah and the countless others subjected to child abuse and torture, the Amir Khan Foundation is launching the Zora Shah Child Protection Fund to protect innocent children from human rights violations across Pakistan, and you can donate to these children at the link provided. There are many atrocities happening around the world, and one of the biggest movements existing in our current world is the Black Lives Matter movement, an international human rights movement originating from the Black American community, which campaigns against the violence, police brutality, and systemic racism towards Black people. There are many great causes that you can donate to, and I've listed some of them here, including the 2 bundles currently available on itch.io, who donate to different funds and networks aiming to improve the lives of Black people. There are many atrocities happening around the world, all of who need our help. Health World provides many useful links, including links to help the families of Black people who have been murdered across America, as well as links to donate to organizations that help refugees around the world, that help the Yemen humanitarian crisis, people in Palestine and Syria, as well as the Muslims held in Chinese concentration camps. The last organization, but definitely not the only one that you should be donating to, is to raise the age of consent in Nigeria from 11 to 18. According to the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, Nigeria has the 11th highest percentage of child marriages in the world. A child as young as 11 can be married off. I mention all of these things just because I feel like it's very difficult for me to speak about belonging, which is the theme of this keynote, without mentioning all of the people that I care about around the world and that, we all should be caring about. So when I think about belonging, the thing that I think about a lot of the time is my sisters, because I feel like there isn't any sort of divisible differences between us. The differences that exist among us are the fact that they enjoy the TV show Riverdale, and I think that show is atrocious. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the memes on Twitter about the dialogue, but it's really, really bad. And for example, I like the band The Front Bottoms, but my sisters think that all their songs sound the same. So those are the sort of differences that exist among us. But when I braid my sister's hair, it feels like I'm braiding my own, and that's how close that they feel to me. The sort of invisible borders of marking people off who belong and who don't exist when I'm amongst my sisters. So I felt like it was most fitting to use this picture of us from when we were kids. And I'm the one that's right in the corner, the one that looks like an Italian mob boss with a backcomb. And yeah, my name is Bahiyya Khan, and I'm really excited to give my first ever keynote. Thank you so much, Chad, and to the entire Freeplay team for allowing me to have this opportunity and to speak about belonging. So like Chad basically mentioned everything that I have in the slide. So, for the sake of repetition, I'm just going to go through all of it again. Like Chad said, I'm from Johannesburg, which is in South Africa. And I'm a game designer and writer. I'm currently doing where I examine how women of color are represented in coming of age stories and what affordances are we granted compared to our white counterparts in these stories. I also lecture part-time in film and am most well known for my game After Hours, which won an IGF award last year. The game is about a young woman who was sexually abused as a child and suffers from borderline personality disorder as a result. When I think about belonging, the place that I feel, aside, from being with my sisters, the place that I feel like I belong the most, the place that when I'm overseas giving a talk and keep thinking about how awkward I feel and how different to my home this country feels, is the place that I come from, the place that I was born in. A place where I'm giving this talk, and it's a place called Lenasia that was formed as a result of apartheid spatial planning when they were segregating all of the races and shoving us, to the edges of the city, just making our lives difficult, really. And I decided to make a little documentary about it. I did have My Chemical Romance song as the background music until Chad reminded me of copyright laws. So I decided to use the song from After Hours because nobody can copyright that song, because it's from our game. So that's Lenasia, that's where I come from. That little surprise that I put at the end is just a small known fact that actually, E.T. also comes from here, surprise. So the reason also that I have that video in there is because the place that I come from has really informed who I am as a person in so many ways. And because of the ways that the place has informed who I am, I was made to feel very ostracized from a lot of places. My university being the place that made me feel this most intensely. So I mentioned all of the places that I was personally made to feel like I don't belong. And these spaces include my university, really just public settings, the IGF booth at GDC, games festivals, and after parties. So in terms of my university, I studied game design because I thought that it combined a lot of things that I was interested in, not because I was a gamer. The only really game that video game that I played was, I think, in 2001 when like A Bug's Life came out, and my parents are divorced. So it was like our weekend with my father, and I think he got like a PlayStation. I don't know, he was playing that. So then we used to like play A Bug's Life when we'd go over there. But that was really the only sort of experience that I did have with video games. So when I ended up going to university, I was excited because it felt like I would be studying something that I didn't really know anything about. And when I got there, a lot of that excitement evaporated so quickly because of the different ways that I was received at my university. So when I got there, oh my God, I just started hearing my nephew crying. Sorry about that. I guess that's what happens when you give a presentation from home. Um, he's 6 weeks old, but that's besides the point. So yeah, when I got to university, I was made to feel very uncomfortable because people would say stuff to me like, oh, I thought you were white until I heard you speak. And then like I heard your accent and I knew you were colored or something like that. And I found that really offensive. Coming from Lenasia, I never ever get confused for that because there's no white people where I live, right? So it's not something that, like, I was 18, the first time that I started hearing all of these things, and it made me very uncomfortable. So there were those sorts of comments that were made, and a lot of like racist comments about where I came from. Lenasia is known as a ghetto in Joburg, and for most people that know it, because there's a lot of lower income people that live here. There's also a lot of crime, and just we're still experiencing a lot of the awful legacies of apartheid. So when people found out that I was from Lenasia, they would say things to me like, "Oh, are you going to stab me?" And then also just like make fun of my accent a lot in the ways that I string sentences together, because there's so many like different languages spoke here where I stay. So the sentence constructions, even though English is my first language, it gets very mixed up a lot of the time. And I didn't think that was ever a problem. I still don't, but a lot of people made me feel like it was. Also in my class, which was about 28 people, around 18 of those people were white, and about 16 of those 18 people were white men. So that was very uncomfortable, just seeing how little people of color there was in my class, and how little women of color, especially. It's since improved a lot from the time that I started university, but for my particular experience, it was really awful. I felt like I couldn't make any friends in my class because there were so many differences between us. I eventually did end up making friends in my class, like as the years went on. But that first year was very, very difficult for me. Like I kept wanting to change degrees, but I couldn't because I came from a high school where my fees were around 2,000 Rand a year. And then suddenly I get to university and it's about 60,000 Rand a year, and my mom is paying it by herself. So there was no way that I was going to switch degrees and make her pay, for an extra year. I thought I'll just stuff it out. And it was really difficult having to do that sort of thing. Also, I just felt very different from people in my class because I wasn't into the same things that they were into. I'd never heard of Skyrim before. And it wasn't just the people in my class that made me feel sort of like an outcast. It was also my lecturers when they would lecture on material that a lot of people in my class seemed to know, but I didn't at all. And, that's fine, the fact that I didn't know those games, but they didn't even help to like contextualize it or anything. It was just sort of taken for granted that everybody would already know it. So I'm very scarred from the game Skyrim, just because of all the ways that it was like drilled into my head all the time. And then also I had a lecturer who was very racist to me, and I only got taught by white people in the game design department, which was also very weird, because we live in South Africa where white people are the minority. And yeah, when I mentioned like to the head of my department about the racist lecturer, nothing happened to him at all. I also mentioned that there were a lot of males in my class. That was also something that made me feel very uncomfortable, not just because I wondered like where are the women, but because I used to feel like some of them would only speak to me sometimes if it meant that something like romantic or sexual would arise from that. And it made me feel very sort of just like I was seen as an object and degraded. It was never just, like with some of these guys talking to me because they wanted to get to know me or were interested in anything really that I had to say, but more just about the end result of, maybe we'll get together or whatever. So all of those things made me feel really, really sad. And I ended up like um, going to hospital for a little bit just because I was very depressed and I didn't know, what to do about all of that. I was also a teenager, so I didn't have a lot of the tools that I have now, because not that teenagers don't have tools, but just because myself personally, I I didn't know how to cope with all of those things. So that definitely resulted in me feeling like I didn't belong at all in the game space. It also felt like it was sort of a reflection of the bigger industry. I didn't know that there were, like Muslim people in the industry like me, or so as many people of color as I know now in the industry, or as many queer people and that sort of thing. So I was just very pleasantly surprised, finding out about this like myriad of wonderful people when I sort of stepped away from just the space of my university. And then in public spaces, like if I was going to get a cup of coffee and like the barista would ask me, what am I studying? Or just anyone really, they would say very strange things to me, like, you don't look like a game developer. And they would make these comments about how like they thought game developers were like were all nerds, or like didn't dress the way that I dressed or presented the way that I did. And it made me feel very much like I didn't think that, because yeah, I was, a game developer. And this is how I look. So and then also like people would say, especially people where I stay, would sometimes say to me things like, I shouldn't be at art school, or I shouldn't be studying game design because that's a white profession, and like our people don't do that. We become pharmacists or doctors. And like I do understand that, because for so many people of color, apartheid in my country ended very recently. It ended the year before I was born. So my parents have lived more than half their lives going through that, and have experienced so many negative things, such as not being able to finish school and that sort of thing. So they really, really do want their children. I almost said the word offspring. I never ever say that word. Yeah, they want their children to get the education that they didn't, and they want us to have secure jobs. And God knows, going to art school or just going into game development is a very, very unstable career path. Yet here I am, and yeah. So just like all of the comments about what a game developer looks like or should be, and how all of those things want me, made me feel like very uncomfortable, and I just wasn't happy that that's the way that people sort of perceived what a game developer was or looked like, or who was allowed to be a game developer. And then the IGF booth at GDC, I remember on like, I think on the Thursday, like it was the IGF Awards on the Wednesday, and we won for after hours. And then the next day, I was sitting on the floor, like near my booth, and these two white men walked past, and I guess they didn't know that I was the like creator of the game or whatever. And they said, "Oh, there's that game that isn't a game," or like some comment like that, and made like this very like ugly comment about how we won an IGF award, but we were pretty much undeserving because our game wasn't really a game. And I see like a lot of experimental game developers tweeting about how annoying it is when people say that their games aren't games. I also think that people just have very deductive ideas of what a game is. But I never personally experienced that until that day at the IGF booth. And it made me so, so incredibly upset for like at least 7 minutes. I was fuming and I kept thinking like, oh my God, when I eventually release after hours, or when will that happen? I don't know. And all of those things. What about like all of the like backlash that I'm going to receive? And like what about, like all of these men who will say that it's not really a game. But then afterwards I was like, I really don't care, what white men think of me, or men generally, so why am I acting like this? Because I genuinely do not care. The people who will appreciate after hours, that's who the game is for. And if anybody else doesn't like think good of it, then okay, you sit with that. And then the games festival and like after parties sort of tie in together. When I'm at a festival and they don't cater like halal food for me to eat, or they only serve alcoholic drinks, and the only like non-alcoholic drinks are like water from the bar that they'll give to you in those like plastic cups, or Red Bull. And I don't, want to be drinking Red Bull all the time or ever really. It makes me feel like they didn't hold me in mind, the people who organized the festival. Because if you were holding people in mind, you would cater to different dietary requirements and that sort of thing. And also, I don't drink because I'm Muslim and because like I don't like alcohol, but a lot of people don't drink for many different reasons. Like if I just think about my large friendship group of 3 people, none of them drink, right? And they're not Muslim. And one of them don't drink just because he doesn't want to drink alcohol, he just doesn't drink. And the other one doesn't drink because she's epileptic. So alcohol used to mess with her medication and that sort of thing. And the third one doesn't drink because sometimes she has some problems with alcohol and it just doesn't end in like a good way. So these are just like 4 examples of people, me and my friends, right? And there are so many different examples of why you shouldn't only be serving alcohol at events or like Red Bull. Because people also are on different medications that it doesn't mix well with, such as antidepressants and that sort of thing. So just, I don't know, like think about other people, not everybody is going to be drinking beer and that sort of thing. So all of those things really make me feel like I don't belong. When I was in London last year, I got invited to speak on this like Muslim panel at People of Color in Play. And the thing that I liked so much about it was the fact that they took like a break for us, for all like the Muslim people present, because it was not just like Muslim people there, to be able to go and pray, because the time for our prayer had set in. And I thought that was wonderful, the fact that they had that sort of thing, and like a prayer space available for us and everything. So I really, really like that. And when I'm at an event like GDC, I remember in 2018, I was there with my best friend, like we both got selected for Train Jam. And there was one day where like I couldn't find anywhere to play at all. And we went and like he really helped me a lot to find an empty like conference room where I could go and play. And he stood outside at the door, like guarding it, because when I'm in America, like the last thing I want to do is to be caught wearing a burqa alone in a room. Like, I can't even imagine how that would go down. I don't know, I'd probably be banned as like a terrorist from GDC forever. So my friend, who is a white male, was like guarding the door for me. And I really appreciated that, because somebody like a white guy just hanging outside a door is not suspicious at all, So the fact that like things like that even have to be a concern for me, it's like, it makes me feel really, really uncomfortable. And I wish so much that I didn't have to be afraid of those things. Going just a bit deeper into like games festivals and after parties, there was this festival that I went to last year, And they reached out to me and asked, if I would like be a speaker there. And I thought that was like really cool and stuff. So I agreed. And they said to me that they were catering for all dietary requirements that year. So I was very like glad because I'd be getting a whole bunch of like meal tickets as a speaker. So I thought like, cool, that saves me a lot of money. Also, it happened just after I came back from like a trip overseas. So I had very, very little money after like paying for, because they covered like a few days of accommodation, but they didn't cover like all of my expenses. So I had to pay for that myself. And at the end of everything, I was left with 50 Rand for a week, right? And to help you better understand that 50 Rand is, I think it's less than $3. So I was very, very stressed about that. I took like a shit ton of food from home. Like in my suitcase, there was like a massive box of cornflakes and like a bunch of like box milk and that sort of thing, which like really helped and stuff. But I thought that like the 50 Rand would be fine since I was going to be getting meal tickets and that sort of thing. And when I got to the festival, I was like, like, where's the like halal like food trucks? And they were like, oh, sorry, we don't have any like halal food. And I was very, very blown away. Firstly, because they told me that they would have it. And secondly, because I didn't know how was I going to eat. Like I was very, very stressed and crying all the time. And it was incredibly scary, like not knowing at all what was I going to do. And I ended up like borrowing a lot of money from my sister. And I just thought like I will never ever be in this position again. It's not worth it. Like I don't get paid to speak here. They don't care about the fact that I can't eat food. I'm never going to come to this event again because when I was there previously, I mentioned the fact that there wasn't like any halal food for me to eat. And they said, next time, like next year, it's the first time we're having this festival. And then the next year was just a disaster. And when I the only like opportunity that I managed to speak to the like festival director at was during one of the nights, and it was very difficult to speak to them because it just like they were drinking, and it felt like I can't really have a conversation with somebody who's this tipsy. Like I don't know how to speak about things that are making me unhappy and things that are important to me and make me feel like extremely othered in this space. So I just felt like, as a festival director and as like the safe space coordinator and that sort of thing, they shouldn't have been, like inebriated that night so that somebody like me could feel safe speaking to them. And I thought like, what if I was sexually assaulted at this festival? Who would I go to? I don't feel comfortable going to somebody that I can't even talk about, like the fact that there's no halal food here, and like this, they were very sort of like, oh, sort of thing about the whole thing. And it just felt like, okay, you are not taking this seriously. So that was a very bad experience that I had. And then at the like sort of ending party of it, my friend and I went to it, which part of like the same festival. And it was at this like very big house. And it was honestly like one of the worst experiences I've ever had in like a game setting. When my friend and I got there, it felt like we came as the like emos who gate crashed a party because all of these like well-known or famous developers were like all sitting together, didn't speak to us at all, like literally not once. And again, no food catered for anyone. My friend couldn't eat as well. Anything, not because he's Muslim, but because he's vegan and like has a lot of food intolerances. And we eventually like left after being there for a very short amount of time because it was just such an absolutely exclusionary experience. So yeah, that's the different ways that I feel like I personally am made like not to feel like I belong. But at the same time, all the places that I do belong were at my university, in public spaces, at the IGF booth at GDC, and at these games festivals. Because people make me feel like, I shouldn't be there without directly saying, you shouldn't be here. Their behavior and the extent that their thought process goes to makes me feel like I shouldn't be there. But, with stubbornness and spite, you can truly feel like you do belong in a place. So something that I did last year was trying to carve my own space. I'm a very big My Chemical Romance fan, the biggest, that's a sort of uncontested fact. And I decided to have a game jam about using a My Chemical Romance song. And there were so many people that were interested in it. Yeah. So as you can see from these 1, 2, 3, 5 responses, it was an overwhelming response to the game jam. So I felt like this is really cool. I didn't know so many people, were into this. Like, as you can see, Alison James was like, I would have asked, if I known it was a possibility. And I think that's the problem a lot of the time, is that we don't know what's actually possible because we don't see it existing for us, So I feel like with experiencing so much of othering and exclusion, sometimes you just have to say like, F it, and like do whatever you want to do. And I wanted this, even if I knew like one person would join this jam, and that's my friend Tom. So I was like, okay, at least 2 people, we would be doing this, and that's fine. But then I think I ended up getting like 11 submissions. So that was very, very exciting for me. And like a lot of the comments on the Itch Game Jam page made me feel very wonderful. Like, as you can see, somebody said, I'm 42 and I felt like I could really worrisomely connect with myself like 25 years ago, type O negative forever. And I love that, it's somebody like almost like 20 years older than me, and we like sort of like experiencing the same things. And I think that's just like really, really cool. The fact that I could like help a 42-year-old, do something like this. And like some of my favorite comments are, things like, thanks for the jam, I'm evil now. It's almost like, wow, did I write that myself? And somebody also said that you are never too old to be a goth. Life gets more complicated as you become an adult. So the older you are, the more your sadness is justified. And that made me very excited about getting older. So a lot of these things have resulted in me thinking about, what does a game developer look like? And I left the space blank because I think that for me, a game developer looks like a person, and people are different. So you fill that space in however you feel is accurate to yourself. I took to Twitter to ask a bunch of people, well, just anyone who replied really, whether they felt like they belonged in the game industry or whether they felt like they didn't. And the reason that I did this is because a lot of the things that I mentioned are things very specific to me. And some of the replies that people sent in response to my tweet are things that I'm never going to experience. So I felt like in order for me to provide a more accurate view of why people don't belong, I should be getting views from multiple people. So they told me that some of them, very few of them, told me that they do feel like they belong because they've been embraced in a very wholesome way by their peers. And I think that that's really beautiful, and I wish that everybody could be doing this sort of thing. But that doesn't exist for everyone. So a lot of people feel like they don't belong because they occupy roles in game development that isn't seen as important as like programming and that sort of thing. And these roles can be anything from like being in QA and community managers. Like, people don't often see those people as like respected as other developers. And that's obviously very incorrect and extremely awful to be made to feel that way. And other people feel like they don't come from a games or programming background or degree. So it sometimes feels like, being in this industry, a lot of people have studied it at university and that sort of thing. And it feels like they don't really fit in, the people that haven't studied it. When you're the only diverse person on a panel, and again, like for every like white person, for every man and that sort of thing that is on a panel, and if you see that there's only like, wow, there's a woman of color on here, why is there only one? You should say that you'll give up your space for somebody else to be there. Don't worry, you'll get like a million more opportunities, So yeah. And then also, you don't feel like you belong when you're at a conference, and so few people look like you. It can really make you feel very alone being at a conference and feeling like you're the only one who is a person of color, That's very scary. Being treated super differently based on your gender. A trans man has expressed that he was treated very differently when he was presenting as a woman. So the tone of voice people would use on him, or thinking that he was less experienced and less competent, or that he needed help and he didn't occupy any leadership positions. It was always like questions posed to him, such as, is this your first GDC? He felt like he didn't belong because people treated him like he was a newbie or an outsider. When you work so much harder than your white, cis, or heterosexual peers and see their career progress way more quickly than yours, it's very painful. The person that responded this also said to me that they feel like in working so much harder, they've acquired so much of knowledge that they're really grateful for, that they can then pass down to queer people of color. And I think that's really wonderful, although I definitely feel like it's very unfair that they've acquired all of this knowledge because they felt like they had to work so hard, so incredibly hard, like 10 times harder than white cis heterosexual people would have to. Having events centered in countries like America where your visa is not guaranteed or your visa is denied. Somebody said to me that they got like a very good opportunity to speak at GDC and it was sort of like the highlight of their career, but their visa got denied. And that made me so, so sad. Like there's a lot of people from many third world countries that constantly have their visas denied by America. And we should definitely be moving events from North America to different countries, because also it's expensive as hell for us to get there. And like, unless we get like a train jam, like scholarship, or somebody's paying for us to come and speak there, we're probably never going to be able to watch those talks and to meet people there, because it's one thing watching GDC talks on a vault and then do only certain talks are made available to you, but you don't get to really meet people. And I don't mean that in like the networking sense. I don't even know how to, I don't like that. I find it very like cold and almost like you sort of using people, but that's a different thing. I feel like meeting people that you respect and become friends with and that sort of thing at events is like more important. But anyway, so also coming from a third world country and being of a different socioeconomic background, that helps. I mean, that makes a lot of people feel like they don't belong. I know that like when, and this, I'm just going to jump to the last point really, I'll go back. But when people ask me if there's like Netflix in Africa and like very, very strange questions, you know, that make me feel extremely othered. Like there's a ton of different African shows on Netflix. Do you think that the people who are in those shows don't have the subscription service in their country? Like I don't know. So it just makes me feel like they think we are very backwards. Somebody also said in the Twitter thread that they're from Brazil, and somebody asked if there's computers in Brazil. And I mean, you know, it's the year 2020. So, and then also seeing how you are paid or not paid in comparison to others, thanks to that game dev paid me hashtag. People don't feel like they belong because they are queer, and they don't feel like they are accepted because of that. When they have the right skill set but are constantly getting rejected from jobs, it really makes you feel very bogged down and like maybe you don't actually belong in this industry. When people get asked if they're somebody's girlfriend when really they're there just like everybody else, you know, because they're part of the industry. When people of your race are only employed in lower positions, it really definitely sends a message. And there isn't food and drink catered for you, I touched on that. When you aren't catered to as a disabled person, when there isn't proper wheelchair access and facilities, and you have to take dangerous and dirty elevators or the back or a basement entrance, it's extremely disrespectful to let disabled people know that, well, you know, this is sort of what I think of you, and this is your entrance, and this is the clean, shiny entrance for everybody else. And I hate that so much. So where can we feel like we belong? How do we really, you know, create spaces that make people feel like they do belong? In places that make us feel validated, in places that make us feel safe, in places where we aren't the token diversity speaker and there's no one else with our politics in the room, in places where we are provided with the environment to talk openly and honestly without fear of backlash. I meant or backlash, but anyway, all of these things are like, I feel like things that people generally are aware of, but you can't just say that we have a safe space policy and that's it. You have to make people feel like, you know, the environment is actually safe. If somebody tells you that your festival is having, I don't know, a predator or having somebody who's done something really horrible, you should listen to those people. You should listen to why having somebody at your festival might make a lot of people uncomfortable and that sort of thing. You should also make sure that you are responsible with the information provided to you. And places, we can feel like we belong at places that cater to us in terms of food and drink, and places with safe space policies that actually adhere to them. I touched on that about, creating a sort of safe environment and making people feel that they can speak to you. So what are our roles as game developers? We have to make people feel included. And obviously our roles are not only limited to these things. But by making people feel included, I mean people that we come across at game events, people that we work with, and our players as well. We have to provide authentic representation in our games. If you can spend so much of time, crafting this like really accurate historic backstory for your white character, you can definitely spend time speaking to many people of color if you are portraying like a black or brown person and find out, the sort of ways that they would usually respond to a situation instead of reducing us to like stereotypes or caricatures of what you think a black or brown person is. To help imagine and construct safe realities for people, to influence positive change and to provide respectful entertainment. Not all games are, like serious or about social change and that sort of thing. But just because they are, a game for entertainment doesn't mean that the ways that characters are represented needs to be disrespectful. Like games are not free of politics, even if they are games for entertainment. One kindness doesn't fit all. So there's the general everyday kindness that we should be giving people, but people also need different forms of kindness. A kindness specific to their politics, a kindness that makes them feel included and supported regardless of their station in life. Talk to these people. Learn what we need. There is no way that it could ever be a bad thing to have a more diverse and inclusive industry. It can only get better for us, and tomorrow doesn't yet exist, so we can still shape it for the better. And what I mean by this is that so many of the things listed in why people feel like they don't belong in the industry, it's not like one thing applies to everyone. So you need to try and learn what do people need and give them what they need, because the things that I need is not necessarily the same things that somebody else would need. And that's what I mean by sort of one kindness doesn't fit all. Just before I end things off, I want to give a special thanks to everybody who responded to my questions on Twitter and had conversations with me. And to all of the like wonderful people listed here, Jack and Hall, Chess Banker, Cami Duplantis, Chato Plak, Siti Nube, Null Fox, Ahmed El Goni, Lyndon Reed, and DJ Hughes. Thank you so much, everyone, for speaking to me and allowing me to use your stories in my talk. Thank you so much for watching.